Hey out there in YouTube land, it's Nathan again, back with another tip for Photoshop users who want to try out Manga Studio. Today we're going to be talking about one of the coolest things about drawing digitally, and that's tweaking your drawing. And we're not going to be using any meth, so no meth at all. Hi everybody, okay, we're in Manga Studio. Latest version here is 5.03, which is what I'm using. I don't have the EX yet, but that shouldn't make a big difference to this demo. This is pretty basic stuff. One of the best things about drawing digitally, and if you use Photoshop you know this already, is the customability and the flexibility of the drawing tools and what you can do with the drawing after you've worked on it. Traditionally, if you want to move something, if you want to make something larger, smaller, rotate it, whatever, you have to erase it and draw it over, or use sheets of transparent tracing paper, that kind of thing. But in digital it's really easy, and in Manga Studio it works an awful lot like Photoshop, but there are a couple of little things that are different that I thought might be useful to learn. Okay, what I've got here is a simple sketch of a charming gentleman with some layers here. The speech balloon's on a layer, the fly companions are on a layer, his head's on a layer, and the body is on a layer. These are all separate, so I can demonstrate this to you. Now, obviously, you can use the Move tool on any particular layer and just drag whatever's all on that layer, everything on that layer around, like this. You can also use any of the selection tools, and there are quite a few. Shape selection tools, lasso, polyline, which is a click and select your own geometric shape kind of thing. You can also select by pen, which is a lot like selecting by brush in Photoshop. And you can automatically shrink your selection from here too, which is a little awkward to use, and I never use it. So anyway, we're just going to go with the lasso because it's the easiest to show you. Let's say, for instance, I thought that balloon was too big. If it was all on one layer, this would still work. I select the whole thing, and you'll get this little selection box here. And these options you get here are really useful. You get deselect in case you made a mistake. You can invert the selection, which means select everything but that. You can shrink your selection and expand your selection from here. You can clear the entire selection from here. You can clear everything but the selection here. You can transform it, scale, and rotate from here, which is what we're going to do in a minute. You can fill it with the active color, which happens to be black at this point. And do that again. You can add tone into it, which is something that Manga Studio does, particularly for doing black and white comics. You use duotone, zipatone, any kind of tone you can define yourself. You can fill the entire area with that tone. It's like a pattern. And then you have this option here to edit these things themselves. So I'm going to focus on the transformation stuff. Okay. So if you click that, you get a box around your selection and a center point, just like in Photoshop pretty much. You can adjust the center point and then rotate or transform from that center point. You can scale, obviously, and you notice that's a uniform scale by default. So no matter which one of these control points I select, it scales the whole thing equally. Now you can change all that over here. It has keep ratio of original. You can deselect that, and it'll automatically give you control over each one. But there's a keyboard shortcut that's like Photoshop that works similarly. If you hold down Control on your selection tool, your arrow will turn to this little white thing, and you can grab a point and drag just that point. It's helpful for doing perspective effects, for doing skews, that kind of thing. Just getting irregular shapes, whatever you like. One other quick tip about selection while we're here, I'm going to undo all my changes and deselect. Since this is on its own layer by itself, the transform tool is also up here. So you can select just that, and it'll automatically pick whatever is on the layer, which in this case is just this. And you have the selection tool all set. Now you don't get the box at the bottom because it's selected. You just go straight into transform. So you can now do any of the transforms we were talking about before. And one of the other things you can do under Edit, Transform, which is great out of the moment because I went straight in, is Mesh Transformation. To get to that, we're going to go back out till we're not selected, nothing's happening. Grab that balloon again. Go to Edit, Transform. What we were doing before was called Free Transform. So you can also just scale and rotate Free Transform. You can flip horizontal, flip vertical from here, which is standard stuff if you're used to Photoshop. And then mesh transformation, this works similar to Photoshop too, except it's a little more limited. In Photoshop, you can dictate how many verts you want to have, how many points of control you have. Here it's pretty much set at this 4x4 grid, which is usually enough. If you need some more fine controls, you can select a smaller object and transform just that. Again, this tool is not a full-featured photographic manipulation software like Photoshop is, so it's got some caveats about doing things like that. But with this kind of thing, you get plenty of control to do individual tweaks and adjustments. And you'll notice that I'm not holding control or anything like that. The selection automatically defaults to that single point move selection when you hover over one of these. Because if you wanted to transform the entire thing, you wouldn't be using a mesh, obviously. Okay, so you can change it around, you can roughen it up, you can extend certain parts of it. Stuff like that. That's useful to know. Just backing it up here. Okay. And to get out of that, you can either go to another selection tool or select any other tool. It'll ask you if you want to apply it, and I'll say no. Now, the useful thing for this kind of thing when you're drawing is, say you were drawing it and you said, his head's cool, but I want it to be bigger. In a traditional drawing, like we were saying, you'd have to erase it, redraw it, probably lose the whole thing, or get some tracing paper, that kind of thing. But digital makes it really easy. I'm just going to do a selection on that layer, do the transform tool, grab the center, which is a little hard to see, but it's a little cross like that. I'm going to put it about where his neck would be, I'm assuming, so that when I rotate it, it'll look like it's rotating on his neck. Okay, but what I wanted to do is make it a little bigger. And bigger is okay because it's on top, the layer's on top of his body. If it was all in one layer, when I made it larger, some of these lines would show through, like this. This is all transparent, obviously. There's no fill or anything like that. Okay, so I made this head bigger. I'm going to rotate it a little bit like this so it's creepier, because everybody likes to be hit on by an even creepier sea monster who's flexing. And then to select, to fit that selection, I can either select something else and it'll say, do you want to apply it? Like that. Or I could have gone to Edit, Transform, Fix, which is grayed out at the moment, which all that means is stop the transformation, undo or to set it and not transform anymore. But it's all the same thing. You can either back out it any way you want to. Okay, while I've still got it selected, I'm going to transform it again. But this time I want to transform it with the mesh transformation like we were just talking about. And again, you'll notice 4x4 grid. But since this is so much a smaller object, I get a lot more individual control. So I can broaden it out a little bit, tweak its features. Maybe I want to cover that white spot down here where it doesn't fill in quite enough. Make his mouth a little bigger. Change the angle of his mouth, like that. You notice the outer periphery doesn't do much if you've already adjusted the inner. It's based on I think it's based on an algorithm that selects a certain amount of distance around the object. You could probably test that with a grid, but you get the point. Minor adjustments if you've already adjusted inside. It's just a fun way to tweak, and it makes drawing a lot easier. So again, this time we'll go transform fix like I was talking about. Saves our changes and goes back to selection, and you're done. Another interesting aspect of tweaking and adjusting digitally, I think this works the same in Photoshop as it does here, just interesting to note it also works in Manga Studio. You'll notice that I have a folder set up here, and that these pieces are actually contained, all the layers you see here with the images on them are actually contained within the folder. So that's useful for organization, but what I wanted to mention here is that if you select the folder itself, not the individual layers, but the folder, and then you go to your selection tool, like so, grab it all, transform, you can now adjust, oops, sorry, turn that off, background area. You can now adjust the entire grouping together. You can adjust the size, the position. You can mesh transform it just like everything else. This is a little more processor intensive, so you'll notice it takes quite a while to do what I actually ask it to do here. This is a high-res file I'm working on also. But you'll notice that I can mesh deform things that are on different layers as one object and still maintain the layer flexibility. So if I say, yeah, that's fine, apply the transformation so that I can get out of this, it'll take a second. You go back in, the layers are still separate. And they're still individually adjustable also. This comes in really handy when you want to do something like coloring your artwork or your line work, and you want to put different layers of texture, say, in something, and you wanted to adjust them so that they're offset, say, or you wanted to tweak a large group of objects together. Usually it comes in with comics where you'll have a layer of line work and then a layer of color underneath it, and you want to make sure that you can adjust them the same so that you don't have to resize your color once you've resized your lines. This is just a really useful way to adjust multiple layers at once, and it's limited only by your processor pretty much. I could have a dozen more layers and still do that. It would just run really slow. That works a lot like Photoshop, and it's quite handy to have for coloring a comic, which is what you'd probably be doing in this software. Alright, well that's pretty much all I wanted to show you today. Just some quick selection tools and tweaking stuff you can do, how you do it the way you would do it in Photoshop so that it's not too difficult to transition. Just keep in mind that Manga Studio is designed to make comics, so it's based more on line art. And even though the paint engine is awesome in version 5, Photoshop's still going to have a few more special custom features that are not quite as powerful in Manga Studio. Not to be an apologist at all, Manga Studio is about 10% of the cost of Photoshop last time I checked. So, hey, you get what you pay for, right? Actually, in this case in Manga Studio, you get a lot more than what you pay for. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we can keep doing these tutorial videos. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to learn about or want to know about, or if you have any questions about what we went over today or any of the other videos. You can also reach me at any of my sites or through Facebook. Thanks a lot.